Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Construction Technology Podcast. I'm your host, Luigi, CEO at Provision. I'm joined by one regular co-host and one interim co-host. Victor joins us from Build Vision. He's Chief of Staff, fantastic poker player, great guy. And we have Andrew from Join, and we're also joined by a special guest, Chris Reeder from Brasfield Gorrie. Chris is a project planning technology manager. And he was kind enough to jump on the podcast and talk about a very top of mind topic, which is data, AI, standardization across the general contractor, let's say, suite of projects, technology projects. So I'm going to pass it over to Andrew, who kick off the context, and then we'll get started. Chris, thanks for joining.
Yeah, thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, great. So Chris and I, we bumped into each other. We know each other for years at this point, but bumped into each other at Advancing Precon, and we've gone back and forth a couple of times around topics in this vein. And I thought it'd be fun to talk about them, and particularly kicking it off with data standardization. God, they got to standardize that name. So we've seen that a lot of firms are looking to invest in standardization of data across their projects. And in some ways, this is a tale as old as time, right? That the construction industry devolves decision-making capability and authority out to individual projects to meet the individual project's unique needs. And so any data standards start to drift. At the same time, especially larger builders want to wrap their arms around their portfolio of work in order to control risk, in order to leverage the things that have been learned on past projects, in order to better predict future projects. And so it in some ways is this tale that's as old as time, but in other ways it feels like it's getting a lot more very fresh attention driven by some of the new technologies that are out there around AI, that there are new ways to leverage and new ways to collect this data, and it seems to be getting a lot of attention, and that's why I wanted to bring it up. So maybe to kick it off, maybe if you'd like to give it just a quick intro for the listeners, and then love to dive in on that topic.
Yeah, that's for me, Andrew, for the intro.
Yeah,
sure. Okay. Yeah, happy to. I appreciate you inviting me to the podcast. Yeah, we bumped into each other in Phoenix. I wasn't there that long. I was just there for one day this year. Usually I'm there for the whole week, but it was good seeing you and the people in the industry. So I've been in technology side of the industry for over 15 years now. So I started out in construction, I worked in the field, and then after college, I got a degree in construction management, worked in Princeton, New Jersey, New York City. Back then it was Lend-Lease, which I think more consigli these days. And then, so I was mostly in pre-construction, and then and back then even, it was kind of like, you're doing two jobs, right? So this was like early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s. And I gravitated towards tech, not intentionally. It's just, I think it's a generational advantage that I was coming into. Kind of in that, you got the Generation X baby boomers, and then I'm in that like weird Oregon Trail generation that is a crossover between the two. So I think I just had an advantage.
Bison hunting capability, or buffalo hunting.
That's right. Yeah.
You hadn't died of cholera.
Right. Many times. Yeah. So that was life experience, right? Cholera. Yeah. So I used to be smart, so back then I think I just kind of thought the way technology worked. Like I didn't never use a tool, but I would just think like the programmer apparently. So I just like figured it out. And so I had that kind of like that dual role, like the tech guy at the same time being an estimator. And then so I did that till like mid 2000s, went down to the southeast to Raleigh, North Carolina, worked for Skanska, and as an estimator for like a year, and then we created a position. So that was mid 2000s till now. I've just been focused on construction technology, specifically pre-construction technology. This year my title did change to project planning. So it includes pre-con, but it's expanded to scheduling and VDC and our lean department and design engineering. So it's what I've been doing for 10 years at Brasfield Gorrie. I'm taking that to the other departments.
Great. That's a great intro.
Go ahead, Luigi.
I was just going to say, it's a very interesting title. I've seen the role, but it's a very interesting title. When you talk about planning technology within Brasfield and Gorrie, what does that typically look? What does that life cycle typically look like? And are there many directions that can go? You mentioned you will build technology in house versus hire or partner with a vendor. Can you give us a couple of anecdotes of what that looks like?
Yeah, so we have our planning and delivery departments, and so that would be on the pre-construction side of the projects, and a lot of stuff we're doing with Andrew and design partners and our subcontractor partnerships, and so that involves an array of teams. I mean, it's interesting that the technology that with BIM and with all the technology that's out there from like the early 2000s, that's kind of designed for like for the Renaissance man, who the old days where you did the estimate and then you scheduled the estimate and then you went out and built the estimate and then you came back in the office and did your next job and you did it all. And that's how we're trained in school as well. Like you learn everything. And then when you get out into the departments, you get kind of pigeonholed and siloed, right? And so you're only the civil structural estimator, or you're the architectural estimator, or you're the MEP. And then you had like BIM, which was like on the other side of a wall that was kind of scary and like I don't know what those guys do, and I don't trust what they do, and so the technology is built for like somebody who knows it all, who understands construction, who's a construction expert, and yet we're kind of like we're just in this lack of trust world where we're like I just do what I do, and so that's kind of where we have all these departments and we're trying to get all of them to work more and more together, and I think we're doing a pretty good job at that at this point, and so we have internal. Like Brasfield Gorrie, we have internal developers. We have an analytics team. We have a AI innovation team, and then we have coders. And so we develop a lot of stuff in house, and it's built around our workflows and sharing. So everybody within the company has access to whatever they want. Where I came from in previous companies, you never shared your estimate with anybody. Like, it stayed within pre-con and operations didn't have access to it. They didn't touch it. And it was kind of like this, us and them. I was, surprised to see like, the Brasfield Gorrie is not that case. I mean, operations gets in the estimates, you share the estimate, and it's more of a team effort. Everybody accesses it from the same place in our own internally built enterprise file management solution. So yeah, so it's just that coordination and connecting tech and integrations and data flows. And so whether you're working directly in pre-con or you're in operations in Procore, all that information is being shared from the estimate to the project management platforms and back and forth, and then all of our analytics. And so it's kind of it's managing all that internal teams as well as external, with our vendor engagements and managing all that, the tech flows and aligning with our workflows.
Does that mean that any solution provider you bring on, you're taking data out, dumping it into a data lake, and then that's being used in various other applications within Brasfield and Gorrie?
Ideally, yes. And so that's a big factor in our partnerships. It's, we're no longer in that world where it's like about features, or somebody made the windows before somebody else, or, it's really not about features at all. Everybody kind of does the same thing, depending on what specific app we're talking about. But yeah, that's going to be a big conversation point, is sharing of data and access to the data, and to put it in that centralized data lake.
Do you think in the future that will continue to be the case for the companies you want to work with? Or do you, like, of the mix, like, for example, you have a bunch of software that you pay for today, and then you also have people that you pay in-house to build software. Do you think that mix will start to shift more towards building in-house? And the reason I ask, like, with the data aspect, is some companies don't want to share their data from the vendor side versus some that do. So obviously if you build it in-house, you can control exactly what you want versus not. So I'm kind of curious if on the software side, you'll end up building more so that you can control the data piece.
I've got mixed feelings on that. I think for larger companies, yeah, there's going to be an element of that. But I think there's a point where we're going to have to share. And that's not a popular, depending on who you talk to, it's not entirely popular. But, I was at an Oracle conference, I guess April or May, can't remember now. But, they're talking about industry models. Right, and that is like everybody's information is going into the same data lake, and we're all sharing everything. It's going to be anonymous. We're not going to know I'm using somebody else's data, but it's going to be there, And I think that's kind of the direction that things are going. There's going to be more sharing. And I see that even within the industry. I have lots of calls with our competitors, and we're just sharing what we're doing. And I'm showing them what we're doing. And so that's been, I think that's positive. So there's already more of a kind of interaction with other companies. And so I think there is an uptick in internal development, but there's a point where we're just going to have to like work together and share our data. And that's my opinion. I think, we'll see how that goes, but I think that's going to be more sensitive for some companies than others.
So it's interesting. One thing that's interesting in that answer, which makes a ton of sense, is like AI coding doesn't come up. Like it's not, oh, Claude can make us whatever application we want. So now it's free, code is free, and so the balance of what we should build versus buy changes completely.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a fair?
Yeah, that's what we're experiencing today. We have estimators have no coding experience, and yet they're coding with AI and building apps. And so we got to figure out what do we do with that, right? So I want to encourage it. It's really, but we still need to with our firewalls, and we got security risks there, and so it's turning into like a sophisticated prototype, and then we give it to our specialist team, who can polish it and release it to the masses. So we're kind of in that space right now where it's like anybody can build an app, anybody can build a tool. There's risk there, and if some companies don't have an internal, like an AI innovation team who can oversee these things, or like a development team, what are you going to do with that, right? Everybody has the resources, especially the smaller companies, understandably.
One of the things that's always like I've always wondered about that maybe you can shed a little bit of light on is like what happens once one of these internal applications is done, like the code is done. Like what does the implementation journey look like? And it sounds like there's a lot of change coming from sort of the importance of data and selecting based on data flows, and there's more really high fidelity prototypes coming in. Is anything changing around implementation, or what are the challenges there and what works well, I guess?
We're still trying to figure that out. So, we have these custom built solutions, and people get excited about it, and then we're talking about deploying it. And then who's the app manager for that? Who's going to support it when there's bugs or enhancements? Is it this estimator who built it? And, he doesn't want to do that. So that's, but that's what we're kind of managing right now. It's becoming the Wild West with people just building whatever they want. So it's really a handoff, and it saves. I mean, for when you have a project and you go into discovery with the team and you get your subject matter experts, and you're planning this custom development solution, it could take months just to understand what the stakeholders are looking for, right? So you have people who have no construction background who are building an app, and they're talking to a subject matter expert we're in a deadline heavy industry, right? There's not much time. That's why construction, most likely why we're slow to adopt technology, because we're just going from one deadline to another deadline. And that's kind of where my role comes in. So while they're, working for paying clients, right? So I'm in the background, just kind of their liaison and working with them. I have construction experience, and so that's an advantage to have somebody full time to develop these things. But now I think if having them build an app, that's a sophisticated prototype where the developer who knows nothing about construction be like, oh, I see it, I can use it, it works. So that does save on that discovery time when you're developing a solution for somebody, because often you'll put all this effort into developing the solution, and then you give it for the test phase for the end user, and it's like, well, it's almost there, but you didn't understand X, Y, Z, and you have to go back and keep developing, right? But this prototype is like, here's how it works. Just polish it up and put it in, into the production.
So there's like a lot of venture capital in construction technology companies. It seems to be increasing by the day. I'm always seeing a new startup come out of the woodwork, and it's great. This is ultimately, there's a lot of problems to solve, and I think this is going to be really good for the industry. But as somebody who is assessing technology and also building technology, what is your mental framework for evaluating companies, and what are your hurdles? You must be flooded with emails and pitches. Hey, I have this AI solution. we can drastically improve X process. Kind of walk us through what it's like. I would just love to see, like, if I was standing behind you and I was looking at your inbox, what does that look like, and what is your filter?
I've had to embrace being rude. So it's amazing, right? There is new companies everywhere. So my phone doesn't even ring unless you're in my contacts. I had to do that. It's just ringing all day. And so leave me a voicemail, I'll add you to my contacts. Next time I'll see it'll actually ring. And and there's just, I can't respond to all of them. I mean, there's so much out there right now. And a lot of them, frankly, are doing the same thing. They're kind of starting with the same low-hanging fruit. So what do you do? And what I'm seeing even in Phoenix, they're building what we already have solved, yet it's got the AI component. So that's helpful, but you're kind of taking a step backwards. So for like bid leveling or design scrubs and things, we have a workflow that works that's successful for us, right? And so there's efficiencies gained with AI, but to use your product, we're letting go of what's already successful to gain something else that is going to give us an advantage. And so it's like, what's the trade-off there? So we're, and for Brasfield Gorrie, we're intentionally not early adopters on anything. We're very content to wait and let other companies be the beta testers and figure out that, because we're successful. We have a good workflow, and like, why disrupt that? And then so give it a few years of maturity, and then we'll talk. Because often there's a lot of security compliance things that aren't there yet, SSO, things like that understandably aren't ready yet for a new startup. So stuff like that, even it's like, we'll give you time, and there's successful competitors out there who can be of just as much help as we could, and it's not like we're going to miss something if we don't get involved early. I think there's a lot of advantage to waiting.
Chris, what are you looking for? What kind of solutions are you looking for in the market? Like, what would make you excited?
Well, so it's be kind of the blending, what we were talking about earlier, the blending of all the processes and departments. So like the model, right? We have a model for most of our projects, and we could for 10 years we could build an estimate from that model. We haven't, but now I think we're at a point where we can, and so we can take our database, our data set, and link it to our model, and then we could actually produce an estimate by navigating through the model and with our historical data, So and then there's going to be ancillary things that would be helpful, and which we are using. We're piloting a lot of AI apps. So I think our approach with all the solutions out there, Luigi, that you were mentioning, we'll just buy them all and have pilots running at the same time with different teams using all the solutions and see which one surfaces to the top. So we do have the design scrub technologies and with takeoff, quantity takeoff and things like that. But ultimately, the vision is really the model, and using the model to produce our estimates, and even scheduling and having all that data, sharing of the teams and of all of our teams working together on the same data set there.
It's interesting, the framing of technology, going slow when technology brings efficiency to a process or a problem that you've already solved, where you guys know how to extract takeoffs from a drawing set. You don't miss scopes very often. Process controls risk well, buildings get built well, clients are happy, versus okay, instead of drawings to estimate, let's go model to estimate. That's very much, I would characterize, and I feel like my LinkedIn is going to blow up if I say this, but as an unsolved problem, where people are not consistently and reliably driving estimates from the model, even though it has been marketed to us for 10 years. And so that's something that's not solved, and so a place where maybe actually you want to spend more time with vendors and lean on some of the knowledge that they've accumulated and some of the things the rest of the industry has sort of imbued in their solutions. I feel like it's just a really interesting framing. I wish I had a question to finish my statement with.
Yeah, I mean, so that would answer Victor's question as well. It's that's an opportunity we've had, but we haven't leveraged. And I think we're at a point now where we actually can.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think for 10 years people have been beating that drum? Is it truly just like AI? Is that the answer, or like why do you like what's the big unlock that's finally this is it?
Yeah, part of it's just people, right? We in a deadline-driven atmosphere, and like we meet our deadlines, and that's very important, and that's kind of how we think. And so we're going to do whatever it takes to meet those deadlines, and we're going to do it the way that's tried and true and that's worked. And then when you introduce a whole nother process, it's very disruptive, and you can't really do parallel. It's going to be more resources, and so you could do it the old way, and you can have it do it the new way. And it's just, I think it's just too much. It takes too much to make that change and meet your deadline, right?
Mm.
Yeah, and it's just, and change is hard. That's kind of been my task and my technology role is just dealing with people who do not like change. And I've got some interesting stories of how badly that's gone. And you think you're giving them
What's
a
the
great.
best? What's the best? What's the best story about how badly bringing a horse to water has gone?
I mean, yeah, this was in New York City, and I've been listening to MEP estimators who complain because we're using technology built for the civil structural architectural group. So I'm like, I'm going to come in, I'm going to be hoisted off the field like Rudy at the end of all this, because I'm bringing in. We did this agreement with Trimble, and we're going to bring in AccuBid and AutoBid. It used to be QuickPen, and man, the MEP team is just gonna like finally somebody's listened, and we're using tools that are built for us. So we rolled this out company wide, and I'm waiting for it. I'm waiting for the applause. I'm waiting for it. And nope. I mean, I'm getting emails from a guy at a bar. I mean, he left. He's sending emails from a bar in New York, copying like the guy listed in Forbes in Australia that nobody's ever seen, and he's copying him, sending complaint hate emails to me because I'm taking away MC squared. And he's an electrical estimator, and I'm giving you AccuBid. Like, you should, this is like, you've been waiting your whole life for this. And then he ended up filing an HR complaint against me and accused me of some crime. So, I mean, so I had to like be interviewed and go through all this investigation and stuff just to prove like I'm not stealing data. And he said I was taking MC squared data and putting an AccuBid or something like that. But yeah, that's probably the craziest.
Yeah, that's the thing that no one really factored in when the pervasive narrative was, okay, construction tech software is dead, we'll just build our own. But then you realize that a lot of the money that you're spending is for customer success, onboarding, change management, which in itself is very, very hard. And your incentives are aligned perfectly because you want the renewal. And so you have to use it and have to get value. Where do you draw the line between build versus buy internally? And I know you mentioned some component of this in the model. But I heard two things from you, Chris. You said, we don't want to be early adopters, but also you're piloting everything. How do you reconcile those two things?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the piloting is really like, there's a lot of solutions out there to do the same thing, right? And
like what? Like when you say the same thing, like what do you mean?
like you go to let's take the QTO AI. So you got like Toggle, you got WorkPack. Bluebeam Max might be, it's a little different. So those are three, whether you use Toggle or WorkPack, I mean, it's really, in Bluebeam Max, I would say Toggle and WorkPack's more identical. You're getting the same thing. You're getting quantities. It's doing all the tracing and the counts, and it's really just give it to the piloting teams and just say which one was more successful and like which one do you prefer. And so we're in the middle of that. We haven't got the results from that yet, but I mean, how do you pick? And historically, we've selected partnerships just based on how well we work together and culture and how we do business. And so it's not really about, so whether it's WorkPack or Toggle, and also alignment with our centerpiece solutions. And so is there integration? Is there partnerships with like Destiny Estimators, our centerpiece solution for estimating? And so are they talking? Is there alignment there? Is there integrations? So that's really how we make the decisions. But for like the startups, and frankly, a lot of the startups, understandably, I mean, the tickets to get acquired by somebody, right? It's one of these bigger companies. Maybe not all of them, but that's kind of that's what the aim is. So you kind of wait that out, right? It's like Trimble just bought DocuCrunch. And that's been around, what, 5 years or more? And so that you're just kind of waiting that out, like what's going to happen here, because we do know who we are aligned with because we weren't early adopters and we waited. So for those centerpiece solutions, so for us to be like Destiny Estimator for pre-construction, Procore, and they're not going anywhere. And so we're in Oracle as well for Oracle Primavera Cloud. So with those three, we're like watching, like who are they partnering with? Because we could sign a 5-year deal, 3-year deal, whatever, with one of these startups, and then we find out Oracle partners with another one, and now what do we do, right? So it's all that kind of just crystal ball, trying to take the temperature of the market and figure out where things are going.
One of the things that I'll recommend that will cut against us is, given how much venture capital is in the market right now, I would recommend, and I've seen companies be very needy when they agree to pilot. And I've had some companies that say, hey, I'll pilot with you. I'll give you some feedback, but I need to have a 3-year license out of this. I need to have some upside, or invite me to your advisory board and give me some advisory shares. I think given that there's so much competition out there, I think companies can be a little bit more needy, quote unquote needy, and really just ask for things like get your fair share. Hey, if I'm going to partner with you, great, I'll partner with you, but I actually should get some upside here, because there's a lot of benefit to the startup when you're giving them feedback, or even when you're piloting something. When we launch a product, we partner and pilot the product with 20 companies. We need a lot of feedback, and some of them rightfully say, hey, this is an investment from my end. You're telling me that there's some rough edges. That's time I need to spend. Give me a perpetual license. Perpetual, I don't know. That's a crazy word, But you could ask for these things, and I think companies should, because there's never been more competition for your attention. Clearly,
Right. Yeah, and there's an advantage, especially with early adopters, where there's some savings, like you said, and you can get in there early and influence it.
You can shape it. I feel like that's the other thing we see, is that if you get really close to a really good early customer, the customer might be the one who wins the most, just in terms of shaping the application and attitudes around data and so forth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. And when we've worked, Andrew, where it's like, this for our workflow, there's a key feature here that's we work with you, with your team, and but that's like a must-have, like this feature. So early adopters, we might have got in earlier, and that we wouldn't have had that hold up later. Yeah, I think it was just, like went back to earlier. It's just we just got to weigh like the advantages to be. It's not like we're never early adopters. It's just kind of a soft policy that we're not eager to be early adopters, and we've been burnt, right? Just because it's been sloppy. It hasn't taken off. Our best tech, the Brasfield Gorrie, has taken off kind of organically, and so there's this entrepreneurial culture here, which personally drives me crazy, because we're talking about data and governance, but I can see it's healthy too, because it's not like we're not mandating you must use this app and you have to use this by within 6 months. That's not really how we roll. We'll have teams who they'll try stuff out. So we got people using our company credit card to make agreements with vendors. That's kind of stuff drives me crazy, and we're trying to corral, but it works. Like they'll use it, they'll be successful, and then they'll tell their friends, right, and their peers, and then it's highlighted on our internal announcements and things, and then it just takes off organically, and next that's our primary app for whatever it is. So that's historically, that's how things have deployed here, and now with all the data governance, and so it's not, as far as financial responsibility, it might be irresponsible, but it's long term, it's been successful for us. Yeah, so I mean, there's pros and cons there, but yeah, we don't want to mandate, and we like our experts and teams to figure out what's the best solution.
Yeah, that makes sense.
How does that? So you've brought up analytics, and like another topic that's dear to our heart is around collecting and leveraging project data to benchmark future project, right? Design metrics, cost information, that sort of thing. How do you, when you don't mandate a system, how do you collect meaningful analytics? Like maybe we could talk a little bit about sort of data standardization and collection across this entrepreneurial industry. I mean, Brasfield Gorrie has an entrepreneurial culture, and there's many general contractors do as well. You got to be a bit of an entrepreneur to go win a construction project and then build a building out of the ground.
Yeah, you got to be willing to create a mess before you can. When you get into analytics, this is where the governance has to come in. And so at the mess by mess, I mean like with these kind of rogue agreements and people just using tech, is it secure? I don't know. Is it? I mean, where's the data? Is there consistency? Nobody knows. It's a mess. But then after it trends and people start using it, and then we step in and like let's make an enterprise agreement here. Let's put some guardrails on, and so that messy stage at the beginning is kind of for adoption and change management and getting buy-in and selling it internally. And now you've got it sold internally and like, yeah, this is a cool tool and we want to deploy it. And well, now we've got this mess, and now we start putting into it within our data lake and putting standards around, and we get the IT team, we get my team, and we take over the engagements with the vendors, and then we start putting rules around things and documentation and training and things like that. So it's that early stage is really just kind of like a selling stage, and you got to be willing to have a messy data set and be okay with that, but knowing it, you'll get adoption out of it, and then you can put some standardization on there.
That's interesting. And so is there a point where that adoption kicks over and you do start to push? I guess you do start to push or mandate systems across project teams?
Yeah, I guess so. That's yeah. After everybody we're getting pressured to mandate it, right? So it's kind of a different approach. Instead of us saying, listen to us and just do what we tell you, it's like we're listening to you, and so they're telling us, right? So it's a kind of a political strategy there. Not, it's just naturally works that way where we got the user adoption, we've got use cases, success, and our stakeholders are eager for this, for this to be mainstream.
And so then, like, so then you have to overcome people who, you got to overcome the MC squared problem and, HR complaints and like all sorts of accusations to get through there. What, like, when you're running analytics, how do you run into a problem around project teams wanting to sort of structure data or label data differently? Like the place we see this most often is WBS codes, where a team in an office, because they've always done it that way, or because a particular client or there's some particular project need, they build a cost coding structure that deviates from what other people are using, even inside the firm. Like, do you run into that problem? And then if so, like, how do you overcome that? Presumably, if in the data warehouse there's cost information, it should be cross-coded, or it should be coded like consistently to make it useful both in benchmarking and in analytics.
Yeah, so yeah, that's a real problem, and we have our our databases, and we have our WBS codes that are hard coded in the background, right? So there's users who never use uniformat. They're users who still want to use CSI master format, the 1 to 16.
16 divisions,
Yeah.
School.
So but with every item, it's gonna, unbeknownst to them, there's going to be coding in the background. That can get messed up pretty easily. You take a paving item in the database and you bring it in your estimate and rename it to carpet. Well, it's going to have all the paving uniformat, master format, and all that behind it, right? You're going to have that. I mean, that's not too common for us, thankfully. But you kind of have to create pain and get burned. That's probably the best way to learn that. As downstream, that'll create problems, and the user has to experience those problems, and they have to go back and fix it, so they won't do that again. But yeah, and there's going to be differences. There's some standardizations with our schedule of values that and people use like a location or system field, or they'll use a user-defined field. I think with AI we can solve that. We're going to have estimates with that discrepancy, but there's consistency in retail parking deck, those kind of breakdowns, residential or mezzanine, these kind of things, that's still the same in text. Whether they use user-defined or system or location or area, I think we can solve that. So yeah, I mean, that's an issue, but I don't think we need to like stop everything and abort because of it. I think we can get around that. And just promote in the why, right? This is what we could get at the end. Now, how do we get here? We need to look at our unit format codes and our master format codes and just check those things. And I think validations is a very powerful opportunity here. We have a validation step when you go from your estimate into our accounting system, and there's opportunity there where you can't get that estimate into the accounting system for your project team to start charging out to it until it passes this validation, right? And so the code's got to match. And so there's an opportunity there where that's pain, and that's healthy pain, because they're eager to get that in the accounting system, and they got to fix a bunch of codes because it's saying, hey, these codes aren't matching our standard chart. And
the pain isn't 3 years later when they're trying to open up a historical conceptual estimating thing and they're realizing they didn't code the last job. The pain is much closer, and the pain is like in between them and the deadline.
Yeah, ideally, that's where the pain ought to be. And so we do have that at that stage, but there will be also pain 3 years later because we don't have a validation for unit format and master format and our area, system, location, whatever you're using. So I think there's opportunity there. And especially with AI, we could build in these validations within the tools while you're building your estimate or while you're using the tool, schedule, whatever it is. It's actually, there's rules in the background that it's going to flag it while you're building it, saying, just letting you know, this is going to cause problems later. You might want to fix it now or take your chances, So internal validation within tools, I think, is a huge opportunity.
To be clear, this initiative is already done. So within Brasfield Gorrie, you already have a repository of all your historical codes. It's all normalized per something or many things. And your individual PMs or estimators, they have to put it into this format before they put it into Sage or whatever ERP you're using.
That's already done when it comes to the ERP. Not for what we're talking about beyond that. I think there's opportunity there where we could expand that, not just for the accounting system, but for all the stuff we're down the road we're going to need to be aligned.
What other initiatives are top of mind for you that you think would make Brasfield Gorrie more competitive in the domain where you like to compete? What other technical initiatives are top of mind for you that you're willing to share?
I mean, like the main one we talked a little bit about with the model, integration of the model and building the estimates. And
when you say the model, Chris, can you just elaborate on what that means for the audience? You're not referring to like an LLM. You're talking about a 3D model.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is like our control model and we have a team that will take the designer's 3D model and we'll fill it out. So we'll recreate it, and it becomes our model, and that's what we'll be using and handing off to our project teams and basing everything off of. So that is like our source of truth for all changes in design, and that team's updating this model internally, but there's that opportunity of schedule and estimate alignment with that, and producing that data set through that model. I think that's the biggest opportunity for us. With like the scheduling side, there's going to be a work in place versus the schedule, and scanning the site, whether it be just walking the site or drones or whatever, so we can actually compare that real time with what we projected versus what's reality. So I think that's a big initiative for us. Yeah, I mean, it's real time kind of site versus prediction in look aheads, for a 6-week look ahead, and getting ahead of things before any issues or risks, getting ahead of those before they come. I think those are our big opportunities that we'll be focusing on.
Yeah, that's very interesting. It's very hard to do those things if you don't have internal tech resources. I talked to some companies who don't have in-house engineers or aren't staffed the way Brasfield seems to be staffed. And it's really just like, which application should we take off the shelf? And I do find that they struggle in a bit of a different way. But then, they're a little bit, they ask for a lot of things from their software vendors, and, you have to say no to a lot of them because they're not things you can necessarily productize. So
right.
It makes a lot of sense why you've taken the approach.
And there could be an opportunity for service startups, right? So there could be provide services. So we have that in-house. There's going to be a lot of companies that don't have that luxury. So there could be a service that does what we do for other companies. I could see an opportunity there.
I think there are some. I don't know enough about what they were specifically doing now, but people seem to sing the praises of Agave for the interconnection between various systems into ERP. Yeah.
Just coming back
Just going
to
into.
Oh, sorry. Just Chris, you mentioned earlier this concept that
Go ahead.
you realize you're going to share more and more with your peers, both data, but then also best practices and systems and so forth. And one thing that's been coming up often in my conversations with general contractors, but also with owners and architects, is, and I'm curious to get your take on it, is that these AI tools are eroding sort of barriers to information. That, call it an owner, is able to take a response to a proposal and run it through Claude or ChatGPT or Copilot or whatever it is that they have, and they're able to become much more informed, and they're in a position to ask much better questions and engage much more directly with what's put in front of them and with the team. And that it's much harder to hide things from owners because they've got sort of help in asking questions and in understanding the information that's presented to them. And it's easier and easier to find these data points that are out there. And when we look at this, we think, well, so for a long time, a lot of how the industry has been structured and worked has been around the difficulty of getting to specialist information and the ability to interpret it. We have all these silos inside of project planning. We have scheduling and we have estimating, because it's just like, okay, I'm looking at this schedule thing. I don't know which side is up. Like that's most people like trying to interpret that information. But at least the first level of interpretation is now much more accessible. Mm-hmm. And so I'm curious how this sharing and information accessibility, how does that change the business? How does it change how people work? Like, what's in a crystal ball, if you look out a few years, like what's different because this information is that much more accessible, both inside the firm, but then primarily to other firms?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an interesting challenge. Our owners are going to become more educated, and our teams, internal teams and expertise is going to be degraded, right?
Do you
Maybe
mean
augmented?
Do you mean they're gonna, like, just that they're gonna be their expertise will degrade? They'll know less than they did, or you just mean the difference will be smaller?
No, I think that's something we got to kind of figure out, right? How are we going to train new hires, right, on how to build, and so we got to figure this out. Like you go through a stint in estimating, understanding the plans and specs and how to build. And then you go to a project site and you see it all come together. With AI, if it's just giving us all the answers and everything's kind of quick, and the estimating is going to be from a week process to a day process, we're losing something there, right? And so how do we educate the next generation within our industry? And maybe it's putting them in the field for the first 10 years, going back to that model where you're actually pouring concrete and tying rebar and do your stint in the field, and then you come in. We just got to figure out we got to learn how to build somehow. But at the same time, what you're saying, the owners are actually going to be more sophisticated in understanding things because they're going to have this cheat code where they can understand a schedule now and they can understand what these terms mean. And so, yeah, it's an interesting challenge. And we got to be expert builders and maintain that somehow, and encourage the owners to be more educated, and that should actually make for a more successful project, right? Yeah, so it's an interesting thing. That's kind of how I see it. Is we got to get strategic on how do we maintain our expertise with this age of everything. The answers are just there.
I think I take the opposite side of that coin. I mean, I have different perspectives than you do, obviously, but unlike consultants, you own the outcome. And your compensation typically tied to the outcome, depending on the contractual model that you're using. So, there was this article that came out in the Financial Times about McKinsey clients questioning the value of their engagements. Information's on tap, similar to what you're saying here. Why am I paying $400,000 for a deck? Doesn't really make sense, except they're not buying a deck from you. They're buying a building. And for you to get paid, you still need to build that building. It still needs to be performant relative to some performance, some output specifications or performance specifications. So how could your team's knowledge be blunted if you still need to own the final outcome?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. So we got to own the final outcome, but just getting to that outcome and then defending that outcome right, is going to be all the more important, right? We have to defend the outcome, and that's where if the experience is being degraded, it's going to be much difficult to defend those outcomes, right? And
So if you take something like submittal review, for example, do you think submittal review is a good idea? Automating your junior employees' submittal review, you speed up the process, but they don't get their hands on the OEM's information and can know what it's like to flip through their specification and counter it against the client provided spec. What are
yeah,
your thoughts on that?
yeah, certainly. I mean, there's key areas where we can take away the grunt work, right? So yeah, I mean, I'm all for that. I think that's healthy. There is something to the grunt work where you're actually learning, right? And you're taking your time and you're looking at words, you're calling out words, you're asking questions, and that's a slow process. That slow process is very educational.
Right.
Right, so there's a temptation with when he just gives you all the answers, you're not going to inspect it word by word, and you're going to do these kind of checks to make sure it didn't miss anything, and that's understandable, but you're missing out on that slow process. It's like the quantity takeoff discussion, when it was just wheels and highlighters, and you're going room by room, area, perimeter, and there's something educational about that. It's very tedious, it's very slow, but you're just looking at room by room and going through, page by page, floor by floor. It's very healthy, right? And then when there's a point where you don't do that anymore, and you got your entry levels who are doing that, and it's slow and it's tedious, but it's very educational, and they take something with them. But now that's all automated, right? There's a temptation there where it's like, yeah, I don't. This saves me time. I can just move on, send this over the wall, and get to my next project. So it's a risk. I'm all for the efficiencies and gains, but we got to think about the next generation and what we're losing.
It's interesting, Billy. I don't know if this is true, but we got to wrap in a second. Like construction in the field work in construction is largely like an apprenticeship teaching model, right? Like you learn by doing in close proximity to like extremely skilled craftspeople. And there's a lot of knowledge work that's a good fit for sort of AI augmentation or AI acceleration. And like that, yeah, there are construction management degrees, but as you're saying, right now a lot of that gets picked up sort of in an apprenticeship relationship where you're handling small tasks. They may be tedious, they may be slow, but you're gathering knowledge as you do that. And like the thing that jumps out as a comparison is math, right? Where we all have calculators in our pockets, just like our teachers said we wouldn't, but we all still know how to do addition and subtraction and so forth, right? But we went through this very intentional like process of doing it the slow way in order for us to pick up the knowledge and skills that that we would retain that and always have that expertise even as we hand it off to machines. And so it's like the thing that jumps to mind is I wonder if there's like space for like really intentional education, like where the apprenticeship model for the knowledge work might break down when it can be accelerated and you're intensely under deadline pressure. It's just not going to happen. And so it needs to happen, as you said, strategically, maybe somewhere else, but it's going to take a lot of thought to get that right. Cool. That's fascinating.
Yeah, maybe there's a parallel effort where you're giving your entry level the old way of doing things, where they take everything off manually, and meanwhile you do it the new way, and then could be like a vetting and testing of. But yeah, I mean, it's just double work, and I mean it's not efficient for cost, and I mean there's disadvantages there, but maybe it's worth it.
I think we can wrap. This has been very helpful, Chris. Maybe we can just end off on one note. Obviously, you're sharing tips with competitors. What would you advise to other general contractors that are looking at similar initiatives in one or two sentences?
Yeah, I would recommend before talking to a vendor is do some upfront work and design your own solution on paper, right? Take what you do successfully today, because you are successful. And so take what you do successfully, line out your workflows. And so just make it up. Like it's Hollywood, right? It's just like, let's get on a whiteboard and like, let's invent what this should look like. Then you take that to the vendor and you present it to them and have them react to it, rather than the vendor coming to them and saying, here's how you ought to do things, and you need to react to it. So it's just flipping it, right? And so do some legwork, go to the vendor, have them react to it and say, can you do this? Yes or no? Show me how. And I think it's going to be a more profitable discussion then.
I agree with that. Chris, can't thank you enough for all the time. Thank you for being so gracious with it. Fantastic discussion. Victor, great seeing you. And Andrew, thanks so much for the conversation. I'm going to stop here. Thanks, everyone.
Yep,
Thanks,
thank
guys.
you.
Take care.